Srimad-Bhagavatam class. I normally give the class on Wednesday in Govindadwipa. I won't be there today, so I'm doing the class on the Dublin Krishna Temple page. And we're going to continue on from where we left off yesterday for Dublin's class, which was in the first canto, chapter 13, verses 5 and 6, I believe. Okay, so I'll just start with a little bit of kirtan. Jaya Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Yashodanandana. Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Braja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava. Kunja Bihari. 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 Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Gopi Jana Vallabha. Giribharadari. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana. Brajajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Jamuna Tira. Vanachari. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So, a reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And it's Canto 1, Chapter 13. And it's verses number 6 and 7. So I'll just read 6 and then do the verse and translation for 7. Purport, sorry. Mumuchu Brahma Baspogam Viva Kancha cottarā Rajatam ahayam chakre Kritsana parigraham. Due to anxieties and long separation, they all cried out of affection. King Yudhiṣṭhira then arranged to offer sitting accommodations and a reception. Text 7. Tam bhuktavantam vishrantam asinam sūtaḥ asane pashray avanato raja prahatesham sashrinvaham. And the word-for-word translation, tam him, Vidura, bhuktavantam, after feeding him sumptuously, vishrantam, and having taken rest, asinam, being seated, sukham asane, on a comfortable seat, prashraya avanata, naturally very gentle and meek, Raja, King Yudhiṣṭhira, pṛthā, began to speak, tesham cha, and by them, śāradvataḥ, being heard. As in the translation. After Vidura ate sumptuously and took sufficient rest, he was comfortably seated. Then the king began to speak to him, and all who were present there listened. So I'll just read that again. And you can repeat as well. After Vidura ate sumptuously and took sufficient rest, he was comfortably seated. Then the king began to speak to him, and all who were present there listened. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I'm not able to gather whether you're picking me up here or not. I think if it was possible even to do a text, what do you call those, WhatsApp text, it might come across my screen and I can read it, and just to make sure that you're there and you're listening, or you're hearing, should I say. So I'm going to read the purport now. So I won't be able to see if there's a text, but anyway, I'll read it and go ahead. King Yudhiṣṭhira was expert in reception also. Even in the case of his family members, Vidura was well received by all the family members by exchange of embraces and obeisances. After that, bathing and arrangements for a sumptuous dinner were made, and then he was given sufficient rest. After finishing his rest, he was offered a comfortable place to sit, and then the king began to talk about all happenings, both family and otherwise. That is the proper way to receive a beloved friend or even an enemy. According to Indian moral codes, even an enemy received at home should be so well received that he will not feel any fearful situation. An enemy is always afraid of his enemy, but this should not be so when he is received at home by his enemy. This means that a person, when received at home, should be treated as a relative. So what to speak of a family member like Vidura, who is a well-wisher for all the members of the family. Thus Yudhiṣṭhira Mahārāja began to speak in the presence of all the other family members. Amagina Timirandasya Jana Jana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militamena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitamyena Bhutale Svayamrupa Vidkadamayam Dadati Svabhadantikam Nama Om Vishnu Badaya Krishna Vishtai Bhutale Shimari Satsrup Das Goswami Nitinamane Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vastaya Vataneshwari Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvashesha Shanyavadi Pastyata Deshatarane Vanchikalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhueva Cha Patitanam Bhavnivyo Vaishnavivyo Namo Namaha. So it's interesting, when I was thinking about today's class, there was two ways which I could go, and I think I will go both ways. So the first way I'd like to go would be in the area of the moral philosophy. It's important to know how to act and to behave properly. The Vedic culture gives us a lot of indications of how this can be done. I just spotted in the purport there that Prabhupada talked about this is an Indian moral codes. He didn't use the word Vedic moral codes. I'm not sure if there's a reason for that. But we do know that those codes of if an enemy comes to the house and you ask him in, he should be treated as well as anybody, as a friend, basically. He shouldn't feel fearful. In the Mahabharata, there's an example of that whereby Bhishma had 5 arrows which he was going to kill all of the Pandavas, and he was going to kill the Pandavas with these 5 arrows, but Duryodhana, in order to make sure that they wouldn't be tampered with, he brought those arrows to his own house overnight, because Bhishma had put all his power and strength in the mantras to make those arrows very, very powerful, so they would kill the 5 Pandavas. So he brought them into his house. He was looking after them in safekeeping. But of course Krishna knew about it, so he asked Arjuna to go to Duryodhana's house and ask him for a boon. So he went there, and he was due a boon from Duryodhana. That was the idea. Duryodhana had to give him some boon from a previous incident when Arjuna saved Duryodhana's life. So Krishna knew all of this, and he knew that if Bhishma had these 5 arrows tomorrow, he would kill all the Pandavas. So he was going to obstruct it some way. So this is how he did it. He sent Arjuna to the house of Duryodhana. So when Arjuna, or the camp of Duryodhana, went during the battle. So when Arjuna arrived at the door, Duryodhana said, "Oh well, come on in, welcome," which was of course incredible, because they were just fighting to the death, and they were just about to kill each other. But this this actual custom was very much there. Come in. What can I do for you? Please have whatever you want. So even Duryodhana was following those principles. Actually, he said to him, "If you want, I will stop even the fight now," which of course he'd been asked to do for 20 years previously, and he vigorously refused every time. But it's considered that he knew the codes as well. A Kshatriya would never take the kingdom like that. So he knew Arjuna would not receive the kingdom like it, even though he was asking and saying, "You can have that as your boon." So Arjuna asked him for the 5 arrows, and he had to give them. So we see that there's many moral codes and systems of behavior, patterns of behavior. And this is why we read Mahabharata, this is why we read Bhagavatam. We hear from the great souls. Now we have to learn how to adapt to that. I mean, you could say that Sati, was it Sati? Lord Shiva's wife, she self-immolated when Lord Shiva was insulted. And it is said in the scriptures we should do that. But if we did that, and it would be destroying Krishna's property, which isn't ours. We noticed that in, I think it was in Burma, one of the monks did that. He just set himself on fire. Probably there's some old text where that should be done in the scriptures, in the Islam scriptures. The same thing happened during the Arab Spring in Tunisia, when that person who was a fruit vendor, because he was getting nothing at the market, and in protest he burned himself alive So should we follow the scripture lock, stock and barrel? The answer to that is time, place and circumstance. We have to know when and when not to. And if we're in any doubt, we should ask the spiritual master. Or sometimes Prabhupada would answer that question, if you're not sure, just use your common sense, Prabhupada sometimes said. Use your common sense. And he said, if you don't have any common sense, then just ask somebody who has. So Prabhupada was quite utilitarian, practical. As we know, he was practical to a fault. He knew exactly when and how to apply something. There's that example when Prakash Prabhu gave this in a class on Sunday. Prabhupada was asked the question, is the Guru infallible? Does the Guru know everything? This was by a reporter, I think it was in New York. And Prabhupada was, said, yes, the Guru does know everything. So the reporter was quite kind of smart, and he asked the question of Hare Krishna, great. I just got a message from Shirupa there. That's good. So he asked the question, how many windows are in the Empire State Building? And straight away, Prabhupada shot back as many. He said, I'm trying to remember the exact phrase, but how much fire is there in a mirage? You know. Prabhupada shot back with a question. You know, and the answer was so powerful because, and you can imagine, like, Prabhupada's right on the firing line there, because he's after making a very bold statement that the Guru knows everything, and the person says, well, how many windows in the Empire State Building? And then Prabhupada talks about a mirage. You know, he asks him a question about a mirage. So it's so powerfully Prabhupada answered that question, because because the material world is a mirage. So what use is knowing those answers? So the spiritual master knew everything, because he understood that this is a mirage, you know, this material world. So Prabhupada was so powerful like that. But we must understand that, as I said, time, place, circumstance. Ask someone with common sense. But there's another point which I took from that, is that how do we implement the Vedic society, or in this age? We're reading from Bhagavatam every day. We have these amazing examples. So I'm going to take, this is the first direction I just wanted to take, is that I wanted to repeat some of the Sattva code of honor that Mahatma Prabhu was presented recently. It's creating a false ego-free culture is the subheading. And the first one is that our lives are exemplary. We make our personal lives and organization an example of what we teach. The success of Sattva is rooted in this principle, since the culture of Sattva is created by the behavior of its members. So you could say this is particularly pertinent at the moment, because like Govindadwipa it's a community, and how we behave in all circumstances is the most important thing. It's who we are. How we behave is who we are. We don't just say something, it's how we're behaving. So therefore, this is very important that we learn how to live in a sattvic way. Second is, we take responsibility for any problems in the organization. And then subheading, if we make a mistake, we acknowledge the mistake and rectify it. If we see a problem, we do not blame others but take responsibility to solve the problem. If we can't resolve the problem, we ask for help. 3. We never abandon a team member in need. The service and support of another team member comes above our own interests. When another member needs our help, we take it as our duty to help him, her. 4. We do not speak ill of others. We create a culture of appreciation by taking opportunities to appreciate others. We refrain from criticism, personal attacks, blame, envy, etc. So we refrain from criticism, personal attacks, blame, envy, etc. 5. We gracefully give and receive input. We speak in an honest, humble, and non-confrontational way when we have an issue with another member and do not give feedback publicly. We may choose to have a third party present. We give feedback with a heart free of envy and judgment and with the purpose of helping the individual and or sattva. We openly receive feedback in recognition that it is being given with affection, and we try our best to apply the feedback. We also create a system in which anyone can make suggestions, give feedback to the management. 6. We see our inability to work well with others as our own defect. We use conflicts as opportunities to improve sattva, improve ourselves, and improve our relationships. So I'm just giving an example of the very practical arrangement that, and this is Mahatma Prabhu is a person who's been around for 50 years in the movement. He's seen so many things, you know, and so this is an offering for communities. Previously, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj made many offerings. Bhakti Charu Maharaj gave many offerings of how devotees should live together, how they can work together, and how they can make decisions, proper decisions together. It's very interesting. We have a council, a temple council, whereby we try to come up with the best possible decisions in all the different areas. We may make mistakes at different times, but if we keep on rallying to the situation and try to constantly, it says here that you know, if we can't do well, then we try our best again. You know, we definitely make, you know, and we see conflicts as opportunities in that sense as well, which is quite an interesting way to look at it. Because the Bhagavatam is the most practical thing in the world, because if you look at the start there, we make our personal lives and organization an example of what we teach. So therefore, this is a most important exercise, not just exercise, service to make our communities strong. It's based on proper principles. It's people are looked after properly, and at the same time people know how to act properly as well, and they know what they're coming into in a situation, and they'll know by how the community members behave. So it's just such an important aspect. And you know, as I say in the Bhagavatam, this whole episode of Vidura having to leave home because he was absolutely castigated by the members of his family, and he went and he travelled for a year, and then he came back at the end of the war, and then he was greeted properly. Vidura was, you know, he was such an important character in all of this in the Mahabharata. He gave advice at the right times. He was really Krishna's envoy in that sense. He so much looked after the Pandavas when they were in a very, very difficult situation. And then the amazing thing is that, of course, even after he was being treated so badly, he came back, and then he even tried to, in this particular chapter, he's trying to rectify the behavior of Dhṛtarāṣṭra. That's his brother who treated him so badly. So it's such an amazing sattvic personality. So for the second part of the class, I'd like to refer to Adilila, chapter Adilila chapter 1, text number 61, 62. I talked about it yesterday in another class, but it's a very important verse. It's written at the very beginning of the Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is reciting verses, and some of the verses he's taking from different scriptures, but this one he's taking directly from Bhagavatam 3:25-25, and it's one of the most. It's almost like a seed verse in. I think it was called a Mula verse. I'm not exactly sure the meanings of that, but it's a very, very important verse. Without further ado, I will say it. Satam pasangam mama virya samvido bhavanti krit karna rasayana kata tajoshinach asvapavarga vartmani śāradvataḥ bhakti anukramishyati. I wanted to say this verse because it's so important from the same point of view as I was speaking about Vidura and the devotees from the Bhagavatam and about our acting. How we actually improve our Krishna consciousness. Like we can make so many decisions, or we can act on the basis of so many things, but unless we're hearing Krishna Gatha, unless we're chanting purely, then the solutions that we take can be just material solutions. But we really have to have that change of heart, the purification of the heart, through chanting Cheto Darbana Marjanam Bahadavi Mahadavi Nirvapanam Shreya Kayava Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Bodhivardam Pati Paranam Pati Pratasvadanam Sarvatma Svapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. So this is the verse that Lord Chaitanya spoke. It's written at the end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're at the start of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And we're talking about purification, about who's fit to understand the whole pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. And we're meant to be representatives of Lord Chaitanya. So we're, sorry as it may seem, speaking for myself, a so-called representative of a member of the Lord Chaitanya's line. So I really, if I'm presenting myself in that fashion, putting this tilak on myself, with my dress code, my tilak, then I need to actually really come up to the mark. So this verse helps us actually very clearly how to do that. Let me read it. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. Oh yes, Satatam Kirtayantomam Yatantas Chadridavata. Always chanting my glories is from the 9.13 in the Bhagavad Gita. This is the way devotees act. It is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens up to him. So if we're getting transcendental experience, then we'll know how to behave properly. We will be behaving properly because we're acting based on the fact that we're a servant of Krishna. That's what will be happening. We will be aware of Krishna. Krishna is a super soul living in our hearts. He's giving us memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. He's living in our hearts, and we are part of Krishna. So, instead of acting on the platform of the false ego, we will be acting as part and parcel of Krishna. Sometimes we forget that's our natural position. So Krishna has set up this material world. Everything's happening here exactly as it should. But we see that Krishna wants to come into this world to, first of all, to give association to his devotees, and also to re-establish the principles of religion. And none more so than in the person of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It is that the overlapping of incidents happened during this yuga of Sri Krishna trying to give this message to others. That's one of the reasons why Lord Chaitanya is appearing and setting up the Sankirtan movement. But also, even more intimately, he is experiencing the highest experiences of spiritual life, in the Madhurya Ras, which is available there. He's giving it freely, and we just happen to be the recipients in this time. So as unqualified as we are, or as one devotee said, your disqualification is your qualification. So as unqualified as we are, we're in this incredible situation whereby the Chaitanya Charitamrita has been spoken, and we can understand the whole aspect of Vipralamba, and or we can be given that, and it's there as available for us. Whether we can understand or not is up to each individual, their qualification. But this is how we get this qualification. It said, it can be properly discussed only in the association of devotees and is greatly pleasing to hear. If one hears from the devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens up to him, and gradually he attains a taste in knowledge that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. So, somehow or other, we've hit the jackpot. We're in this incredible scenario whereby we can understand the most intimate, loving affairs of God. And all of us, I think, will admit how disqualified we are to receive this. It's not that we suddenly become, how would you call it, callous to other spiritual systems, or we think that somehow or other we are in a higher level. Trinada pisa nityana, torora pisa hishna, manina manadina, kirtaniya sanahari. This is the jewel, this is the currency. We have to really, really, really deeply understand our fallen nature as well, simultaneously. And some devotees in our movement are so qualified in their humility. This is just a whole area that we can learn. This is why this has to be learned gradually. Like it says that the way of transcendence quickly becomes open to him, and gradually he attains a taste and knowledge. Let's just hear what Prabhupada says in the purport. This verse appears in the Srimad-Bhagavatam 3.25.25, where Kapila Dev replies to the questions of his mother Devahuti about the process of devotional service. How when it advances in devotional service, the process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. So this is brilliant, Prabhupada speaking. He tells us that the process becomes progressively clearer and encouraging. We're getting energy from this, folks. It's giving us energy. We're seeing, wow, this is working. And we're getting that real recognition in the heart, this feeling, this fullness, this happiness that Krishna is there. So see, it's not just that we're there, but Krishna is there. And we realize we're part of Krishna, this great personality who's the source of everything. Nityo Nityanas, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Bahu, this verse that Krishna is, he's there. He's the eternal among all eternals, and he's there, and he's there in our heart, and we're getting information about him, and we're our knowledge is coming more and more clear to us, and in the association of devotees, we're getting to understand who God is. Unless one gets the spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. So this is really, really good, that we can make advancement this way. This is, it means that we're not foggy anymore. There's possibility of spiritual advancement in this life, and this is the most precious thing that's there, and we cannot afford to lose it. no matter what. This we should hang on desperately onto this onto this process, and we should root out the things which are preventing us from making spiritual advancement. We should be very expert at noting, and we have to. This is why I'm saying that in the community of devotees, because I see that this is where this really goes on. I've been in the midst of communities of devotees for many years, and I've also seen many difficulties and in the ways people have related to each other. But it seems to me that this is where it all happens. So the devotees, not only do they have to have moral codes, but they should deeply immerse themselves in the scripture. And it's almost like that will automatically, the moral codes will happen if we deeply immerse ourselves in the scripture. That's why there's two sides to this. It's not that we can neglect one or the other, but it means that we have to study both. And we have to hear. It says that unless one gets the spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it's not possible to make advancement. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. So there's the taste there. The taste means that no matter what, we're going to do whatever is necessary to please the spiritual master and to please Krishna. We know, I wasn't present when Srila Prabhupada was there, but I was present when His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj was there. He was speaking about this instruction from Prabhupada that your love for me will be shown by how much you cooperate together to keep this movement going. So keeping this going is keeping the Sangha going, keeping the association, and these instructions on the sattva coming from Mahatma Prabhu, because it's very more easy to get to Shuddha Sattva if we get to sattva in that sense. And this is why the processes of an art and nivritti, obviously we showed a little faith and associating with devotees and performing rules and regulations in art and nivritti, and then steadiness. There's more likelihood that the movement will be on steady ground if devotees are on a steady platform. What to speak of ruchi and shakti, and because this whole Chaitodharpana Marjana verse goes from Shraddha to Prema in that sense, and a whole Shikshastaka goes from Shraddha to Prema as well. So this verse is going from Shraddha to Prema as well, and Prabhupada is speaking about it like that. And initially one must develop confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master. So the science is there, we're given the science. Then as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by the execution of devotional service. His misgivings, in other words, his faith becomes stronger and stronger. And other obstacles, we know what the obstacles are: lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. Envy is a particularly difficult one. But anyway, strong attachment, this is a Shakti, for the transcendental service of the Lord develops as he continues listening to the messages of Godhead. So he continues listening to these messages that are here in the Bhagavatam. I'm just here, we're talking about one verse, and it's so powerful, just that one verse. And a Shakti, of course, means that you just only want to hear about spiritual things. You don't want to hear about material things. It's spiritual things. It's a drag to come back into the material world almost. But you're just hearing and discussing. Because you're acting and you're preaching as well, and therefore you have to adapt in this world too. Because by preaching, basically, telling the message to others, that's what Krishna is also. That's what he wants. He wants us to do. Then he reveals to us that we're in that line. Prabhupada is, he's talking to this dumb reporter, and on a high talking about skyscrapers, and in New York, but still Prabhupada is there. He's speaking to him. He's still trying to inform him. He's still trying to. So this is the instruction of the spiritual master that we're taking on board to give Krishna consciousness to ourselves. Number one, preach to ourselves, and then preach to others. And if he steadfastly proceeds in this way, he is certainly elevated to spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So does Prabhupada want us to reach Prema? Of course he does. Of course he does. That's what he wants. That's his instruction. This famous instruction from Prabhupada. Become spontaneous, perform spontaneous devotional service. It's like an instruction, but spontaneous means that you do it anyway. But it's just a wonderful paradox that Prabhupada is saying there. He's instructing us, but at the same time he's telling us to be spontaneous. A pure devotee constantly engaged in the loving service of the Lord is identical with the Lord, who is always seated in his heart. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is one without a second, and therefore he is all-powerful. He has inconceivable energies, of which 3 are principal. The devotee is considered to be one of these energies, never the energetic. So the energetic is always the Supreme Lord. The energies are related to him for the purpose of eternal service. And a living entity in the conditional stage cannot uncover his aptitude for serving the absolute truth by the grace of Krishna and the spiritual master. So that is, the energetic is always the Supreme Lord, and the energies are related to him for the purpose of eternal service. That is who we are. We're eternal servants of Krishna. That's who we are. That's our identity. And we can uncover this aptitude for serving the Supreme by the grace of the Krishna and the spiritual master. Then the Lord reveals himself within his heart. Krishna reveals himself here. So we're in contact with Krishna. Oh, I see Krishna. This is who I am. Now I finally understood. And he can know Krishna. He can know that Krishna is seated in the heart of every pure devotee. Krishna is actually situated in the heart of every living entity, but only a devotee can realize this fact. So this comes back to the realization from the scripture. If we understand that, then we see Krishna in everyone's heart. Then we can treat everybody properly. We can actually learn how to behave properly with every living entity, because we see Krishna in their heart. It's a science. It's a powerful science, and and then I want to go on to that was verse 61. That was from Adi Leela as well. And the next verse is a famous verse about Krishna and his relationship with us. Sadhavo hridayam madhyam sadhunam hridaya tvaham madanyat te na jamati jananti naham te byo managapi. With the translation is this is from Srimad-Bhagavatam 9:468. Saints are my heart, and only I am their hearts. They do not know anyone but me, and therefore I do not recognize anyone besides them as mine. So this is the non-difference. This is the non-difference. This is how the spiritual master is as good as God. Non-different from God. The Shakti-Vesh avatars, this the devotee can understand. We don't make the mistake by thinking the messenger of God or the son of God is God. We understand how he is God, because he's non-different from God, because he repeats the same message of God, because God is saints are my heart, and only I am their hearts. So that it's incredible, that whole aspect of Krishna being there. That's non-different from Krishna, the devotee's heart. They do not know anyone but me, and therefore I do not recognize anyone besides them as mine. So can you imagine if we had a whole society of devotees with that realization? What we could not do, how we could not affect society, that would be amazing. So Prabhupada in the purport explains that this very verse in Srimad-Bhagavatam 9:468 is in connection with a misunderstanding between Durvasa Muni and Mahārāja Ambarish. As a result of this misunderstanding, Durvasa Muni tried to kill the king, and when the Sudarshan Chakra, the celebrated weapon of Godhead, appeared on the scene for the devoted king's protection. When the Sudarshan Chakra attacked Durvasa Muni, he fled in fear of the weapon and sought shelter from all the great demigods in heaven. Every one of them was unable to protect him. And therefore Durvasa Muni prayed to Lord Vishnu for forgiveness. Lord Vishnu advised him, however, that if he wanted forgiveness, he had to get it from Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira, not from him. In this context, Lord Vishnu spoke this verse. So Krishna, sorry, you have to go to that person there. You know, I'm his heart, he's my heart. In that aspect, he's more my heart than I am, so you have to go to him. The Lord, being full and free from problems, can wholeheartedly care for his devotees. His concern is how to elevate and protect all those who have taken shelter at his lotus feet. So this is, Krishna is thinking about us like this way. He's thinking how he can elevate and protect us. This is an amazing understanding. The same responsibility is also entrusted to the spiritual master, how he can protect us and elevate us. The bona fide spiritual master's concern is how the devotees who have surrendered to him as a representative of the Lord may make progress in devotional service. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is always mindful of the devotees who fully engage in cultivating knowledge of him, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. And in our ISKCONs, and even when Prabhupada was on the planet, devotees had to take shelter of the authorities that were there in the temple. Prabhupada would divest that, he would divest that power to the authority. Ultimately, obviously, there is also power, of course, to the spiritual master, but that's the way that we functioned, and Prabhupada functioned. So the strength is there if the devotees can elevate themselves, and the whole of ISKCON can function and can actually help society if its members can adapt these understanding. And here's another verse. This is from 1.3. This is coming up. I'm sorry, but this is just coming up now. Someone else is going to be giving this verse. It's 1.13.10. Saints of your caliber are themselves places of pilgrimage. Because of their purity, they are constant companions of the Lord, and therefore they can purify even places of pilgrimages. So Krishna set up this world in an incredible way. He's made his devotees his representatives. He's actually made this world as such. It's not therefore that the world is devoid of pure devotees. And instead that the sun shines, the rain falls. This all happens only because there's pure devotees on the planet. This verse was spoken by Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira to Vidura in the Srimad-Bhagavatam 1.13.10. Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira was receiving his saintly uncle Vidura, who had been visiting sacred places of pilgrimage. Mahārāja Yudhiṣṭhira told Vidura that pure devotees like him are personified holy places because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always with them in their hearts. By their association, sinful persons are freed from sinful reactions, and therefore, wherever a pure devotee goes is a sacred place of pilgrimage. The importance of holy places is due to the presence there of such pure devotees. So that was a little section on the Bhagavatam that are on the Adilula that I wanted to bring about, which I kind of thought about today from these two different approaches to trying to appreciate Bhagavatam and practically apply it in our daily lives and apply it in such a way that it will be of benefit to society at large, which is the purpose of Prabhupada coming to the West and spreading the Dharma. Obviously, it can be confusing at times. How do we do this? With all that's going on, and even our own internal challenges. But this is how we understand it. From my understanding, that we have to get as close as we can to Krishna. That's who we are, and Krishna will act through us. And when devotees act together, there's such an amazing potency, such an amazing power. And Krishna's so happy when devotees are all working together. And simultaneously following the order of the spiritual master. Krishna is so pleased with this, so that the dividend of it is that Krishna consciousness gets spread far and wide and becomes an attractive force for the good in the planet. Devotees are satisfied only with devotional items, topics about Krishna. A Shakti become attached, very much attached to Krishna, and topics about Krishna, and are always conversing about me. Krishna says, that's our goal, and we actually can experience. I love that phrase that Prabhupada was talking about. We can become encouraged from within. Such a powerful phrase, because when something adds up, then it gives us confidence. So that is an internal thing, you might say. It can manifest externally, but it's an internal thing. That confidence of that Krishna is inspiring us from within. Prabhupada so beautifully put it. The process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. So Prabhupada's really talking from, you could say he's talking from experience, of course, but I'm not trying to quantify the spiritual master or whatever, the founder Acharya. But the way that he presents it makes it very clear to me that these victories are the most important thing. The victory to me is that the devotee is making progress in spiritual life and is experiencing that progress. Unless one gets the spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. So that means that there's no point in us even being in the Hare Krishna movement if we're not making advancement. And that advancement has to be done with humility. Because we're just pretenders, we're just wasting time. We're just externalists. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. There, you probably gives you the test. Are you getting a taste? Okay, it's 25 past. I kind of put on my computer there, but it's behind me, and just to see was there any comments. I can if anyone wants to text a WhatsApp, I can see it just coming across the screen. I can't hold on to it without cutting myself off. But if there was even a comment, but then again, it's anyway. I'll give it a couple of seconds if anyone wants to make a comment there. I'm just about coming to the system whereby I'm going to start to learn how to read if there's comments coming up during a class. But it's hard just when you're there with only one screen. But I'm sure it can be done. Anyway, I'll give another few seconds. If anyone has any comment or question. Okay, that's fine. So, again, looking forward to be back in your association very, very shortly. Hopefully we will be together again soon. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki